All right, if there's been one lens this year that's kind of surprised me, it's got to be this one. This is the Sirui Aurora 85mm f1.4. And wow, is this thing actually surprisingly good. I didn't know what to expect from this lens when I first put it on. I've used all other Sirui lenses in the past, and honestly, they're really nice as well. But this thing, $499 for an 85mm autofocus f1.4. Didn't really know what I was expecting out of that lens. I didn't know if it was going to have like crazy focus breathing, if it was going to have like bad autofocus, or whatever the case might be. But honestly, this thing has actually astonished me on how good it performs and how good it looks. Now, $499 is about a quarter of the price of that Sony G-Master, and it's not going to be quite as good as that G-Master for a few different reasons we'll get into later. But wow, this thing has actually blown away my expectations with this lens. All right, so let's get this box opened up and see what it looks like. All right, so as you can see, this lens is actually fairly compact. It's 540 grams, which means it doesn't weigh a lot. It's really well balanced in the hand with the Sony cameras. In fact, this lens was very comfortable to use with this camera while I was out shooting in Mexico. All right, so let's take a look at some of the physical features that's on this lens, and then we can talk more about some of the specs. So looking at the lens, one of the first things you'll notice is it actually has a variable aperture ring, which is really nice. It starts here in the automatic mode, so that means you're going to be using the camera settings to control the aperture. But if you want to use it manually, you can go from f16 all the way up to f1.4, which makes it really nice to be able to do it by hand as well. Some people like that. I personally sometimes still like using the A mode and using the camera, but it is sometimes nice when you're shooting video to have that on the top so you can actually change the aperture slowly and make it a little less obvious that you're changing something on the fly. So on the side here, you'll also see that it has a click on and off switch. So that's actually going to be to control the actual haptic feedback on the ring itself. So like I said, if you're shooting video, you could actually seamlessly turn this to adjust something if you need to on the fly without it really kind of showing up in your video. Then if you flip to the other side, you'll notice that it does have the focus hold button and as well as the autofocus manual focus switch so that you can change that thing on the fly just as easy on that. I personally still like programming my manual focus switch on the back of my camera so I can do it there instead. But a lot of people do like that autofocus switch. So, and then you'll see at the front of the lens here, it does have that manual focus ring, which is really easy to use and it's very smooth. So if we take a look at the front of the lens here, it does have a 67mm filter thread. It has 14 different glass elements in 9 different groups. These lenses are going to help with the chromatic aberration as well as ghosting. And if we look inside here, it does have 15 blade aperture, which is going to be very impressive for that kind of blurry background or bokeh. So the minimum focus on this lens is 2.79 feet, which is about kind of average with most of the 85mm lenses. One day we'll finally get closer, but honestly, until then, 2.79 feet is still pretty good. One of the other things that I really like about this lens is that it just, because of its size, you can lay your camera flat and it stays flat. The lens isn't bigger than the camera or smaller than the camera, so it doesn't teeter. It just sits really nice and flat. Now, if you're using a cage or something, that's obviously going to change. But honestly, this has been just a really nice compact lens to just kind of move around and take photos with or video. Now, as far as the autofocus is concerned on this thing, when I was shooting video, this thing locked on like immediately, and it stayed locked on really well, which is a little surprising because sometimes some of the less expensive lenses just struggle a little bit with autofocus and speed. This thing did none of that. This thing locked in instantly, and it stayed locked in where I wanted it to. Now, as far as photography, this thing did just as good as it did for video. It locked in on subjects almost right away. It stayed focused on things when I was moving around. The eye focus caught right away. It didn't really lose eye focus or eye tracking. But I will say I did have a couple times out of the 3 days I was shooting where it didn't really want to focus on something at first, and it would go through kind of like a focus breathing cycle where it would go forward, come back. Sometimes what I would do is I would just turn the camera upside down and then come back up, and then it was fine, or I would just tap touch on the screen. I only really noticed that a couple times, so nothing that really concerned me, but it was something that was there. But there is another thing I did kind of forget to talk about on this lens, and that's on the back here. You'll notice that it does have this cool USB-C port on top, and that's so you can actually do firmware updates straight into the lens. So now it is possible that I'm still running the prototype firmware that came with this lens, so maybe this has already been fixed on all the models that have shipped. And also, since I have the lens off, you'll notice that it does have a rubber gasket along the outside of the lens, so this lens will be weather sealed and keep you away from the elements. So what actually comes with this lens kit is inside you'll notice that you have this nice little soft bag case. I think Sirui's been kind of giving these on most of their lenses. And inside the pouch, when you first get the lens, it's going to be completely vacuum sealed, as well as you're going to have the lens hood and a lens cap, and then also a rear lens cap. But that's everything that comes with this lens itself. So like I said earlier in the video, this lens comes in at $499, which is an absolute steal for an f1.4 85mm lens, especially one that's this good. Now comparing this thing to like the 85mm G-Master Mark II, it's going to be a little bit of an unfair battle because first off, that one does have breathing compensation built into the lens if you have a compatible camera. So that lens won't have any focus breathing while you're shooting with that mode. This thing is not compatible with Sony's breathing compensation, so you won't get that. And I'm sure that G-Master probably has some different coatings on the lens, which will help better with ghosting and sun flaring and things like that. So while we were shooting in Mexico, I was very surprised on how good this lens actually performed. The video side of things, I wasn't getting like any focus breathing, which is something my Batis 85 kind of does do a lot. But this thing was just absolutely perfect for like video shooting. It got everything I wanted it to do, and it stayed locked in on all the subjects that I wanted it to stay locked in on. Now, when we were shooting a lot of photography stuff, I was aiming this thing straight into the sunset. So this thing I was going to be testing to see like how much flaring, how much ghosting you would actually get. So while I was shooting on this lens in the sunset, I was also using the Sirui mist filter, which is a quarter mist, to see kind of like how much cooler that looked in the sunset. So let's check out some of the video that we took with this lens, and then after that we'll check out some of the photography. So like I've been saying for a long time, the 85mm focal range is one of my favorite focal ranges. I like it more than the 50. I think it's just a perfect focal range to be kind of like getting good details. If you need to step back a little bit to get something more in frame, you can still do that. But it's just one of my favorite looks. I love how it compresses the background, and I love how blurry the background can get with this lens. Now, I didn't really shoot a whole lot in f1.4. I was still shooting a lot of 2.8, sometimes f4, sometimes f8. But if you want that super blurry background, this lens absolutely delivers on that. But anyways, you guys, those videos look good. Those photos look great. If you guys have any other questions about this lens, please leave me a comment down below. If this video has been a help, hit the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, follow along. And as always, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.